Hi, I have your video for 1 Samuel 15, and in this chapter I found it was a very pivotal story in the reign of Saul. And right off the bat in verse 3, God is asking Saul to go attack the Amalekites and totally destroy everything that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. And I think this is partially for the benefit of the Israelites in general, but also testing Saul to see what he's going to do. And of course, God's never surprised by anything. He knows what Saul's going to do. And lo and behold, Saul makes up his own version of what should happen and does his own thing. But the story, the way Saul's narrative unfolds is a little bit like a novel that keeps changing. So obviously the Lord is grieved. I mean, he used the word regret. I regret that I have made Saul king in verse 11, but I think it's one of those things where, he doesn't wish he made a different move, but he's sad about the unfolding of Saul's decisions. And that's when we start with the changing of Saul's narrative, and he keeps getting pinned for his lies, and then he's like, no, wait. So it starts in verse 13. Samuel is confronting Saul about his lies, and he's like, wait, no, I've carried out the Lord's instructions. And in 15, he says, the soldiers actually did this. I didn't do it, the soldiers did. And then we spared the best of the sheep and the cattle for the Lord's benefit, to sacrifice to the Lord, as if, God needed a little bit of help from Saul. And so Saul, helped God out, picked up the pieces, fixed the situation for God. Really changes the narrative to make God look like the weak one, and he looks like the strong one here. And Samuel confronts him again, is like, care to change your story? And Saul's like, well, matter of fact, I will change my story. I did obey the Lord, he says in verse 20. And then in 21, the soldiers took the sheep and the cattle, and the best was devoted for God in order to sacrifice them to the Lord. So he's still thinking Samuel's totally going to believe that I did God a favor here. Confronted again, then Saul changes his narrative in 24 and says, I was afraid of the people, so I gave in to them. So now he is like the victim here in this whole scenario. And out of his fear, he had to, give the people their way by letting them, do as they see fit. And since Saul did not put to death the king like God asked, Samuel took the matter into his own hands and did that himself. But definitely by the end of this chapter, you see that God is like, I'm going with a different plan that will bring me the glory. And Saul is definitely he has outstayed his welcome as king. But I love that this kind of ushers in the idea of David coming in, because God redeems the situation, and the story of David is another way that God glorifies himself. So even though it's kind of a dramatic chapter about Saul and his poor choices and his constant thinking that he's going to fool God, God is not fooled, not for a second. And I can't wait to see how the appearance of David in this story, this next chapter, kind of changes that and shines the light back on God. So tell me what you think.